Hello and welcome to episode 18 of Unpacking Articles. The article we're unpacking today is called Pairing Learners in Pair Work Activity. And I chose it because it addresses something that all language educators can relate to: forming pairs in mixed proficiency classrooms. And I would say that all classrooms are mixed proficiency classrooms. In some cases, the proficiency differences might be quite significant. Some students seem much more advanced than others, and that's what this article is focusing on. Something else we can probably relate to is this description of the instructional context that the authors provide. And I quote, "Given the large number of students in the classes, individual learners had few chances to speak." That's what I see in a lot of classrooms, including my own. Most of the talk is done by the instructor, which is not always a bad thing, but it is true that relying mainly or exclusively on whole class interaction results in learners having limited opportunities to produce more than sporadic, short statements. Previous research on student interaction has compared student pairs of the same or different proficiency level, and the general trend is that when at least one of the students in the pair is relatively advanced, then there is more negotiation. In other words, if both students have a low proficiency level, then there's not as much negotiation and they tend to leave issues unresolved. A similar strand of research has looked at interactional patterns as opposed to just the proficiency levels. So, for example, students working together might be collaborative, where they help each other out, they listen to each other, they engage with each other's suggestions, or they might have more of a dominant-passive relationship, where one student takes control, makes most of the decisions, and the other student simply accepts those decisions and doesn't contribute a lot to the task. And so this study is trying to shed light on what factors we should take into account more when forming pairs. Is it the proficiency or is it the interactional patterns? The participants were 30 students of English in Saudi Arabia. They formed a total of 15 pairs. 5 pairs were formed by 2 students of high proficiency, 5 pairs of low proficiency, and 5 pairs were 1 high, 1 low. The high or low proficiency was determined by their teacher based on performance in class, assessments, etc. And you might be tempted to think, well, but how reliable is that? But I think the researchers did the right thing by asking the teacher to estimate the proficiency, because that's exactly what would happen in the classroom. The students had to complete a collaborative writing task. They were given 2 choices of topics, and they had to write a short composition in 20 minutes. This short composition was 3 to 4 paragraphs, according to the instructions. The interaction was recorded and then coded for language-related episodes, which you might recall from episode 13. These are instances in which the learners discuss language issues, like how do you say this, how do you spell that, etc. And the coding of language-related episodes was fairly standard, what they focused on and what the resolution was. The researchers also looked at the use of the target language, in this case English, and they did that by counting number of words in English and number of terms that were predominantly in English. They also coded the interactions holistically as falling into one of these interactional patterns: collaborative, expert novice, and dominant passive. As you can probably deduce, the collaborative patterns means that they were engaged with each other and nobody had clear control over the task. Now, in the dominant passive pairs, one learner takes control and the other contributes little to it. In the expert novice pairs, you also have one learner with more control, but there's a little bit more engagement with each other, in the sense that the expert encourages the novice to contribute to the task. So out of these 3, collaborative would probably be the best, expert novice would probably be the second best, and dominant passive probably not the best. Let's look at the results in terms of language-related episodes. The pairs composed of 2 low proficiency learners had the lowest number of episodes on average, and they did not resolve them correctly as frequently as the other pairs. With respect to target language use, there were no major differences, at least on average. And I found that interesting because I would have thought that the lower proficiency pairs would perhaps rely more on the shared language than the target language, but that was not the case. All of the pairs used the target language at about the same rate on average. In terms of the interactional patterns, all of the pairs composed of 2 low proficiency learners were collaborative, all of them. 3 out of 5 of the high pairs were collaborative, but only 1 of the high-low pairs was collaborative. And the only cases of dominant-passive patterns, which we said before, probably not the best, those happened among the mixed proficiency pairs, the high-low pairs. The bottom line is a confirmation of what other studies have found. There is more negotiation and more opportunities for learning with at least one more advanced partner. And indeed, that's essentially what the interaction hypothesis was all about. But is this a false bottom line? The authors caution against concluding that it's as simple as that. Like most relationships, it's complicated. Can we really separate proficiency and disposition toward the task or their partner? When you think about it, it's quite possible that proficiency is affecting their interactional patterns. Perhaps a learner who feels that their own proficiency level is much higher than their partner, they're going to be more inclined to take over, take control. This quote from the article captures the pedagogical implications and the complexity of forming pairs. And it says, when pairing students, it is not only proficiency difference which needs to be taken into consideration, but also the kind of relationship learners form. And I would add that learners work differently, not just with different classmates, but when completing different types of tasks. Perhaps to write a 3 to 4 paragraph composition, some learners may have simply preferred to work by themselves, and they may have approached their interaction with someone else as an imposition more than as a learning opportunity. So let's talk about the limitations of the study. The first one is the sample size, and you may have noticed that I don't always bring up sample size when talking about limitations of studies, but in this case, they were comparing groups of 10 students, 5 pairs of each type. And even though interaction studies tend to have small sample sizes, that to me is a little too small to reach robust conclusions. The second limitation has to do with potential task effects, which is a very common limitation in interaction studies. I think the task that the researchers used for this study favored high proficiency learners. Writing a 3 to 4 paragraph composition in 20 minutes sounds better suited for more advanced learners. If the task was too difficult for low proficiency learners, they may have felt overwhelmed, and that can certainly impact how inclined they felt to focus on form, to discuss things related to language. And the last limitation has to do with a distinction between opportunities and outcomes. I don't dispute that language-related episodes are opportunities for learning, but without post-task assessment measures, we don't really know how much anyone actually learned. And on a related note, who is learning? Who is benefiting from the interaction? Just quantifying language-related episodes is not enough. We need to understand who was initiating them and who was resolving them. The takeaway is, just like there is no magic formula to guarantee acquisition, there isn't a magic formula to form pairs. All we can and should do is be mindful of the many factors that may influence interactional patterns and therefore influence learning, so that we can increase the odds of collaboration and increase the odds of language development. That's just my take on it. As usual, I encourage you to read the original and draw your own conclusions. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time.